confirmed one of President Trump's well-qualified nominees to the federal bench and advanced the nomination of another. That's what we'll do today. With Allison Rushing's nomination confirmed, we'll vote later today on the nomination of Chad Riedler and then turn to consideration of Eric Murphy to join him on the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. Mr. Murphy is a graduate of Miami University and the University of Chicago School of Law and now serves as the state solicitor of Ohio. And he's held 2 prestigious clerkships in our federal courts, including for Justice Anthony Kennedy on the U.S. Supreme Court. So I hope our colleagues will join me in advancing another wise choice for our nation's judiciary. Now, Mr. President, on another matter, in months, our nation has watched the Democratic Party take a sharp and abrupt left turn toward socialism, a flawed ideology that's been rejected time and again across the world is now driving the marquee policy proposals of the new House Democratic majority. And nothing encapsulates this as clearly as the huge self-inflicted national wound the Democrats are agitating for, called the Green New Deal. Let's review a few of the greatest hits in this particular proposal. Democrats have decided every building in America needs to be either overhauled or replaced altogether. They're putting homeowners and small business owners on alert. The all-knowing central planners here in the nation's capital are raring to remodel the entire country. Up next, ending all fossil fuel and nuclear energy production. Forget about coal and all the jobs it supports in my state of Kentucky and around the country. Forget about the oil and natural gas industry and all those jobs as well. The list goes on. Oh, by the way, forget about nuclear too, proving that this proposal doesn't even pretend to be a serious effort to reduce carbon emissions. It's just a statement of what sounds trendy in New York and San Francisco. Anyone seriously concerned about carbon would know that nuclear power generates a majority of America's carbon-free electricity. You'd think the carbon police would be glad that from 1995 to 2016, American nuclear power meant the emissions equivalent of keeping 3 billion cars off the road. Let me say that again. You'd think the carbon police would be glad that from 1995 to 2016, American nuclear power meant the emissions equivalent of keeping 3 billion cars off the road. Oh, but alas, Mr. President, these Democrats won't let facts get in the way of what's fashionable. Besides, why should America bother being a net exporter of energy when we could leave all of that economic potential to competitors like China? Naturally, as background documents explain, this means eliminating all combustion engines. Cars, lawnmowers, commercial airliners, everything must go. Everything must go. And by the way, the backgrounder really helps clarify another goal behind all of this is providing economic security, even those who are, quote, unwilling to work. All this and more, Mr. President, can be ours for the low, low price of a staggering expansion of centralized government and, wait for it, upwards of a mere $93 trillion. $93 trillion is more than every dollar our federal government has spent in its entire history to date. Combined. It's more than the combined annual GDP of every nation on earth. As our colleague Senator Blunt and the Policy Committee have pointed out, this amount of money could rebuild the entire interstate highway system every single year, just for the heck of it, for 250 years. And you'd still have a little left over. A little left over. Or maybe Americans would rather have something nicer to drive on the roads we already have. For the comparatively cheap price of just $66 trillion, I'm told the government could buy every American a Ferrari. What a great idea. For the comparatively cheap price of just $66 trillion, the government could buy every American a Ferrari. But of course, everyone would have to get their driving in before Democrats ban the internal combustion engine. So to be clear, $93 trillion is just one number in one attempt to estimate the price tag of this fantasy novel. The proposal is so lacking in details and math that it's almost impossible for analysts to even know where to begin trying to connect it to the real world. But let's talk about where this money would come from. That's always a question worth asking. So if we spread that $93 trillion out over 10 years and over every American household, you get about $65,000 per household. $65,000 every year for every household. The median income in this country is around $60,000. So, Mr. President, like any good socialist plan, I'm sure we'd hear a lot about soaking the rich. We always do. We'd hear that wealthy Americans could pay for this whole thing if only they were sufficiently civic-minded. But of course, that's not even close to accurate. A huge share of the bill would land at the feet of the American middle class. There aren't enough billionaires. There aren't enough billionaires to pay the trillions needed for this massive government plan. Even if Washington decided the IRS should grab every single cent of adjusted gross income above $1 million, all of it, take it, it would only bring in a little over a tenth of what the Green New Deal is estimated to cost every year. Take all the money away from the millionaires. It would only bring in a little over 1/10 of what the Green New Deal is estimated to cost every year. In fact, in order to break even on this proposal alone, the federal government would have to take 9 of every $10 that every single American earns. The federal government would have to take 9 out of $10 of everything every American earns. And you'd better believe that families' last dollar would need to go toward keeping the lights on. By one analysis, middle-class families could see their power bills jump by more than $300 a month under the Green New Deal. So that would take up the last dollar they had left. I know Senator Ernst and several of our colleagues will be speaking at greater length on this issue later today, and I'm sure each of them will point out there certainly is one green thing about this sprawling proposal. One green thing. The huge, unprecedented piles of middle-class families' money that Democrats are itching to grab. Now, on one final matter, I want to discuss something that will be happening on the floor of the House, perhaps as soon as today. Remarkably, Mr. President, for the second time in just the last 3 weeks, Speaker Pelosi apparently feels compelled to have her members vote on a resolution that would reportedly condemn anti-Semitism. A resolution that will purportedly condemn anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, again, for the second time in just the last 3 weeks, this seems to be in response to the invocation of crude, hateful and backward anti-Semitic stereotypes by one specific freshman member of the House Democratic majority. This Democratic Congresswoman already stoked controversy in mid-February, having publicly proclaimed that Israel's supporters are only in it for the money. Apparently, she believes the only reason leaders would stand with the Jewish people and the state of Israel is Jewish money. Well, I think we've all heard that kind of talk before, and we must not tolerate it. During my time in the Senate, I've had the honor of traveling all over America. I know I speak for colleagues on both sides of the aisle when I say that support for the state of Israel and the U.S.-Israel relationship is deeply felt all across America. Our relationship is built on common values and democratic principles, our shared interests, close partnerships, and deep friendships. The support for Israel that you see in this chamber is not the work of some shadow conspiracy. The members of this body support Israel because so many Americans support Israel. I had hoped this regrettable episode might have caused this lawmaker to be more careful with her language. But alas, just a few weeks later, here we are again. More anti-Semitic tropes. This time she claims that supporters of Israel have actually, quote, an allegiance to a foreign country. That's the old, ugly, dual loyalty smear, Mr. President, plain as day. We should also not overlook that in a few cases, these anti-Semitic statements have provoked offensive anti-Muslim comments in response. That is hateful and completely inexcusable as well. So now the House of Representatives seeks to distance itself from this member's remarks and will apparently soon vote to condemn anti-Semitism for the second time in just a few weeks. Well, I hope this time the message is clear. Support for Israel isn't about the Benjamins. It's about the hearts and minds of the American people. And it's unconscionable for any member of the United States Congress, even less a member of the House Foreign Relations Committee, to repeatedly traffic in base stereotypes. The long, bloody legacy of anti-Semitism is spread out over the pages of history. But regrettably, this scourge is not confined to history. Long common across the Middle East, violent, hateful acts of anti-Semitism have been increasing throughout Europe. Less than a lifetime after the Holocaust, 9 out of 10 European Jews say anti-Semitism has increased in the past 5 years. 88% of French Jews say they actively worry about targeted vandalism. That country alone saw 541 anti-Semitic incidents in 2018, a massive 74% increase from just the prior year. In France, in 2006, a Jewish man was kidnapped for ransom because criminals assumed his Jewish family had to be rich. When their plan failed, they tortured and killed him. A memorial tree was planted in his honor. Earlier this month, that tree was found chopped down. Anti-Semitism on top of anti-Semitism. Trends here in America are troubling too. Every year, hundreds and hundreds of anti-Semitic incidents take place in America, everything from vandalism to harassment to threats in schools, college campuses, and other public places, to targeting Jewish institutions. This racial and religious hate-mongering deserves swift condemnation. Swift condemnation. So I'm glad the House is at least taking up this short, symbolic resolution and rejecting the anti-Semitic tropes this Democratic Congresswoman keeps peddling. But at the end of the day, Mr. President, it's just a symbolic resolution. If House Democrats wanted to, they could pass real legislation to take action against anti-Semitism and shore up America's relationship with Israel. I know they could because last month the Senate did just that. We did that here in the Senate last month. The House should take up and pass S1, the bipartisan foreign policy legislation that the Senate passed last month, 77 to 23. That legislation walks the walk. It supports Israel and gives local communities the flexibility to combat the so-called BDS movement, which is a kind of anti-Semitic economic warfare that opponents of Israel are trying to wage against the Jewish state. The bill also attends to other critical priorities, such as renewing U.S. commitments to Jordan's security and providing for the Assad regime's butchers to be brought to justice. S1 is not just about combating anti-Semitism or bolstering the U.S.-Israel relationship. It's about standing with an Arab partner like Jordan and providing justice for the Syrian people. So, Mr. President, my point is this: resolutions are fine, but the House could do something that mattered by taking up S1 that we sent them last month that deals with the BDS boycott against Israel. Words are one thing, meaningful action is another. House Democrats should walk the walk and pass S1 without any further pointless delay.